Growers are under immense pressure from rising costs, unstable market dynamics, inadequate policy and financial support, unpredictable weather, and yet the increased demand for agricultural commodities from a shrinking resource. So supporting sustainable agriculture is, at this point, a must-do, and it's going to require a collaborative effort. As agriculture is so interlinked with the environment, the economy, as well as human and non-human communities, changing how we do it is really complex. And understanding the impacts of human changes to the landscape is arguably even more complex. Sustainability can be considered at multiple scales. It's often location specific. And in many cases, achieving sustainable outcomes means considering trade-offs and balancing these outcomes. Here I'm highlighting just a few of the key areas in which outcomes can be measured or estimated as indicators of whether our agricultural systems meet long-term sustainability goals. These include water quality. For example, we can look at edge of field nutrient and pesticide losses, leaching, as well as erosion and runoff. There's more and more information on how we can understand soil health and the impacts of management on indicators such as soil organic matter, soil aggregate stability, and the ability of soils to hold water and make that available to plants. We can look at our greenhouse gas emissions in agriculture and think about ways to use agriculture to sequester more carbon in the soil. And critically, we can try and estimate the response of crops in the form of understanding crop stresses and predicting crop yields. So what we're going to talk about today is a tool that Stone has developed, again, over the last several years, originally designed with a water quality focus and now enhanced to help us understand the potential impacts of agronomic management on a larger suite of sustainability indicators. The Farm Phosphorus Reduction Planner, or Farm Prep, is a web-based tool that's been largely developed in collaboration with the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets, again, with the intention of incentivizing management changes and the adoption of practices across the state. Farm Prep runs model simulations designed to assess the impacts of long-term agronomic management at field and farm scales. The model that Farm Prep runs in the background is the Agricultural Policy Environmental Extender, or APEX model. This is a well-vetted, physically based model supported by the USDA that simulates water, sediment, nutrient, and pesticide transport, as well as crop growth, biomass and yields, and nutrient cycling, including carbon. The primary drivers of the model are weather, physical characteristics of fields, and agronomic management, so including crops grown, tillage, manure and fertilizer applications, and the implementation of practices. So for the rest of this webinar, I'm going to dive into how we've developed this tool and for what purpose. I'll provide a little bit more background on the initial development of Farm Prep and how it's been used. I'll show some of the functionality and workflow components that we've built out. And I'll talk a little bit about the work that went into establishing a robust APEX model for incorporating into this tool. And we'll show some reporting examples and talk about how you might use the tool to evaluate multiple outcomes related to sustainability. And then lastly, I'll offer a few concluding remarks. So in Vermont, agriculture contributes significant amounts of phosphorus to our surface water bodies, and it's the primary contaminant of concern in the Lake Champlain Basin. Farm Prep was originally developed to help the Lake Champlain Basin reach total maximum daily loads established by EPA in 2016. We've had a number of collaborators over the years, most notably the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets, who have been really active partners in developing this tool to meet specific needs of one of their programs, which I'll talk a little bit more about shortly. And we've been lucky enough to have some NRCS Conservation Innovation Grant funding for some of that work. We've also had specific development funded by the Lake Champlain Basin Program and NUEPIC. We worked with UVM, University of Vermont, both some folks from their extension office and researchers who have used the tool. And we've collaborated with a couple of other groups on specific components of the tool, like Nutrient, with whom we looked at simulating innovative manure technologies and more advantageously distributing manure across farms. So we're really grateful for all of those collaborations that have supported the continuous development of this tool. Some of the core pieces of functionality that the Farm Prep system includes and that really kind of build the framework or architecture of the tool are shown here. We obviously have a customizable web-based user interface. This is obviously a really important component as it's how users interact with the tool. We've done a lot of work over the years to develop intuitive data entry workflows for different users. So for some users, this means minimizing data entry to the extent possible. And for others, it means streamlining that process as much as possible while also collecting the data required for both the Apex model as well as many program requirements, as well as any program requirements. The tool, including the interface, is user specific. So you only see data that is yours or assigned to you, depending on your role. There's role-based functionality. For example, in the agency bag system, verifier roles cannot change assessment inputs, but can access certain controls to indicate whether management has been field verified. There's a secure backend database that stores obviously user data, but also includes thousands of options for agronomic management that we've established and that are representative of typical management in Vermont. The tool runs dynamic on-the-fly field scale Apex simulations using AWS Cloud Container Services. And we've established a few different types of assessments. So some comprised of many Apex simulations to help users achieve various goals in using the tool. And we've obviously built out a good bit of model analysis and reporting that happens automatically in the tool as Apex simulations get completed and allows us to report results back to the user in real time. So as I briefly mentioned, we've had the pleasure of collaborating with the Vermont Agency of Agriculture on development and customization of this tool. For the last 5 years, Farm Prep has been used to support the Vermont Pay for Performance program. This is an innovative program that was designed and implemented as sort of an additional funding mechanism for farmers outside the more typical practice-based approaches. So the state wanted to achieve better communication of the value of agricultural land stewardship provided by farmers to the public. They wanted payments to farmers that represented more cost-effective investments of public funds with respect to desired outcomes. And they wanted greater flexibility and autonomy for farms and how they generated those environmental outcomes on their own farms and operations. So the goals of the program were to reduce phosphorus loss from agricultural fields, largely to meet TMDL requirements and state water quality goals, increase farmer buy-in by allowing farmers to decide what practices to implement on their fields, produce verifiable, measurable, location-specific outcomes, incentivize stewardship, and provide sufficient and equitable payments to farms. So the Agency of Agriculture uses Farm Prep to execute field-specific Apex modeling of current and baseline management for cropland and pasture fields in Vermont, where the tool predicts relative changes in runoff, erosion, and phosphorus loss. The tool calculates payments, both for performance in terms of reducing phosphorus loss in comparison to that baseline, as well as an additional stewardship payment. And the tool provides some customized reporting to help communicate performance and payment outcomes to farmers, as well as technical service providers and agency staff. So we've just completed the 5-year pilot period of the Pay for Performance. And overall, I think it was a great success. Generally speaking, I think most folks would agree. I'm not going to go into details of sort of the evaluation of the program, but farmers acknowledged that it provided an additional revenue stream for practice implementation that they may not have received through other programs. And the state was able to show that significant additional acreage of practices were implemented as a result of farmers' participation in this program. So the Agency of Agriculture is working on rolling out a Pay for Performance 2.0, and we're obviously really excited to continue to be part of those efforts here in Vermont. So I've got a little video here. So in Farm Prep, the goal is producing field-specific outcomes. We know that practice effectiveness is not the same everywhere. It depends on conditions specific to the field and location, including weather, soil, and field characteristics. And Apex is well suited to take those attributes into account, but you have to provide that information in order to model it. Oh, there we go. So we've done quite a bit of work, as I mentioned, to streamline this data entry as much as possible. This little video that's playing is showing the key components of data entry for public users of the tool. So for public users, we've streamlined that data entry as much as possible, including providing default values from publicly available data sets for just about everything except for your field boundaries and your field management. For users enrolled in the Pay for Phosphorus program, some of those default parameters like soil test phosphorus or surface organic matter are required from things like your your soil tests, your nutrient management plans. And so we've developed forms that walk users through what they need to enter and make sure nothing runs until that data entry is complete. Field management is specified by all users by a series of sort of dynamic drop-downs. And again, the tool walks users through providing that information. We've also developed some specific tools or functionality that further support this, such as the ability to upload soil test information and manure application rates for all of your fields at once. You can also copy management from one field to another if applicable. So again, we acknowledge that there's a data entry component of this tool. On our end, we've tried to make that as easy as possible, getting what makes sense from publicly available data sets and focusing on user experience for the rest. And one of the changes that's being considered as part of the next sort of rollout of pay for performance in Vermont is a payment to cover just the initial data entry component, as well as additional farmer support for that process. So we're confident that in the context of this particular tool, the trade-offs of getting field-specific outcomes outweighs the hurdles of data entry. So there are 3 types of assessments that can currently be run in Farm Prep. Planned and actual assessments are specific to the Pay for Performance program. They assess user-specified current management against a spatially explicit baseline management. That baseline management has been, to this point, representative of the modeling that was done to establish the state's TMDLs, the total maximum daily loads. And these assessments are what are used to calculate those performance-based and stewardship payments for farmers. Practice assessments are designed to assist users in easily understanding the potential impacts of specified practice-based management. So the tool automatically takes the current management and adds or modifies the management to meet the definition of these practice-based management scenarios. So for example, the tool creates a buffer scenario where a 25-foot buffer is added to any field included in the assessment that doesn't already have one. Or if the current management includes conventional till in the spring and fall, the no-till scenario will strip out those tillage practices. The baseline management for these assessments is essentially the current user-specified management, and this is available for all users of the tool. Optimization assessments are designed to test various configurations of practices on the different fields within a farm and find management solutions that meet a user's desired farm scale reduction in phosphorus loss in comparison to a no practice baseline. So these assessments return results for the first 10 solutions that it finds where your overall P loss across the farm is within 5% of your specified reduction target. The order in which the tool tests these configurations and therefore the solutions that are found can be customized by the user. So users can prioritize practices as well as exclude practices at either the field or farm scale to tailor those solutions of these assessments. And these are also available to all users of the tool. So we've talked a little bit about the tool development. The other sort of major piece of this work is the model development. Apex is a process-based model, and so there are a number of inputs, and it does require some calibration and validation. In the context of a tool like Farm Prep, which is designed to work to simulate many different conditions, right, and work anywhere in the state, we kind of group inputs into these 2 categories. So we have these site-specific inputs, which in Farm Prep are acquired either from publicly available data sets like Surgo or NOAA land station data, or from user inputs. And then there's what we call global parameters. And these are parameters that apply to all fields simulated in the tool. And they typically dictate, for example, what algorithms are used for certain processes or parameter values for certain equations. And these global parameters are the focus of model evaluation efforts for us. So this is where we bring in observed data and try to make sure the model is doing a good job at representing the various processes that we're most interested in. And for a tool like Farm Prep, we want to do that across as many actual sort of real life field sites and with as much sort of real measured data as possible. So we at Stone have put a lot of effort over the years to calibrate Apex for use in this tool. I'm not going to talk in detail about sort of the methodologies behind that, though I'm certainly happy to follow up with folks who are interested in that component. What I do want to highlight, however, is one aspect of our most sort of recent calibration effort that is somewhat unique, because we wanted to provide users with such a broad range of indicators that help us understand how sustainable agricultural outcomes. It means that we really needed a lot of observed data over a lot of different metrics. So at a really high level, we focused on 4 different ways to kind of evaluate the model with respect to building out sustainability indicators. We first compiled as much site-specific data as we could for sites that we could actually set up in Apex. So that had to include location as well as specific management. And we used sites that had measurements for any of the data types that I'm showing in this table, or those are the data types that we found that were relevant to this work, and that we could set up in Apex. So some sites, for example, had edge of field runoff and nutrient modeling. Others had greenhouse gas monitoring. Others maybe had yields and soil health monitoring. So we used all of these data points in a multi-objective calibration to essentially come up with like our first cut at this global parameter set. We then used some additional data sets that comprised of standardized soil health measurements for a larger number of sites, but sites that we didn't have enough information to set up specifically in Apex. So these data sets were the product of soil sampling across the state of Vermont using the Cornell State of Soil Health, or CASH framework. So they included standardized measurements of key biological, chemical, and physical attributes that comprise sort of our understanding of soil health. Things like organic matter and active carbon, plant available water capacity and bulk density, nutrient concentrations. And while we couldn't simulate all of them with Apex, we were able to simulate a good number of them. I think it was 8 in total. And we essentially did model simulations of all of the soils and weather across the state of Vermont, as well as multiple management scenarios, and compared the distributions of some of those metrics to the distributions of observed. So you can see here, this is sort of our grid of Apex simulations that we set up across the state. We also conducted a model comparison effort with respect to the greenhouse gas and carbon outputs. So we wanted to see how Apex would compare to a couple other models commonly used in that space, including Comet Farm and DNDC. And then lastly, we pulled together some expectations based on literature as to how we would expect management scenarios or practices to impact these metrics. As you can imagine, there's not a lot of site-specific data that really gets to that effectiveness. So we went to the literature for this, and we looked at, again, that very large number of simulations to gauge whether the model was simulating those expected trends sort of across this wide range of conditions that are present in the state. Excuse me. Okay, so I know I've skipped over some of the methodology details, and again, I'm happy to return to that if people are interested, but I did want to highlight some of the results of this model evaluation effort as well. So first, we're going to look at a couple of slides that compare model predicted distributions of a few of those key soil health metrics to the distributions of observed results from those statewide soil health data sets. So one of those data sets was specific to pasture, and the other was specific to cropland. So we've broken up these plots based on cropland and pasture simulations, as well as by soil texture. So you'll kind of want to compare orange to purple and green to blue. The box plots show the median, the 25th and 75th percentiles, and outliers are defined as greater or less than 1.5 times that interquartile range for each of the box plots. Here we're showing model predicted versus observed percent soil organic matter in that top 15 centimeters of soil. Soil organic matter is obviously one of the major components that comprise our understanding of soil health. It's the primary driver of carbon storage and impacts the physical, biological, and chemical properties of the soil. We see that the range of values for soil organic matter is similar between the modeled and measured data. And we see that the model predicted values generally bracket the observed, which is exactly what we were expecting to see. We simulated something like 800 combinations of soils and weather, whereas I think there were less than 100 in these data sets. And for each of those unique soil and weather combinations, we simulated multiple management scenarios because we didn't have management associated with these data points. So the model results include a lot more variability than the observed. We do see here that the median apex predicted soil organic matter is a bit lower than the median state of soil health data, which again are the cropland data points. And then the median apex predicted soil organic matter is generally a little bit higher for the pasture data than the observed. And we're pretty confident that that bias is a product of the management that it's included in these simulations. One aspect is that we're running many more row crop management scenarios than hay scenarios in that cropland bucket. And we see that in many of the row crop scenarios, there's a decrease in soil organic matter over the course of the simulation, whereas in the hay scenarios, there's usually an increase or sort of a constant soil organic matter over those simulations. So that may be creating a little bit of bias in these distributions. Secondly, we're running 30-year model simulations, so all the results I'm showing are based on 30-year simulations. And even with some of these practices, 30 years of continuous row crops generally does draw down soil organic matter, particularly within this top 30 centimeters of soil. And here we're looking at sort of annual average values, so that could be pulling these down just a little bit as well. But overall, we felt like this was indicative that the model results are generally reasonable and realistic and doing a pretty good job of bracketing sort of our observed values. And I'll just show one more of these for plant available water capacity, which is related to porosity and represents the amount of water stored in the soil that's available for plant uptake. We calculated this from Apex as the difference between field capacity and wilting point. And in Apex, you can parameterize this to be dynamic. So this is sort of a model prediction. And we see really pretty good agreement with this one, both in terms of magnitude and trends across soil texture. And of course, we did these plots for those 8 different soil health metrics that we could match up Apex outputs with observed data for. And generally, we were, pretty happy with the agreement we saw with all of them. Okay, so now for the next few plots, what we wanted to do was essentially confirm that the model is responding to various management scenarios consistently with trends that we know to be true or would expect to see based on that review of literature. So again, these are based on either average annual or average growing season values over a 30-year simulation. For these batch scenarios, for these batch simulations of hypothetical fields, for each unique soil weather combination, we established a baseline scenario representative of a continuous cropping, conventional tillage, essentially no practice scenario. And then for each of those fields, we also simulated various practice management scenarios. So these plots are showing a % change in each metric in comparison to that continuous cropping, conventional tillage, no practice baseline. So it's not the change between the start and the end of the simulation. It's the difference, in this case, for example, of the annual average % organic matter between the baseline and each of these management scenarios on the x-axis. So this plot is soil organic carbon in the top 15 centimeters. We see that pretty much all of these management scenarios result in generally higher annual average organic carbon in top soil layers in comparison to a conventional baseline. Which is consistent with what we would expect. The only one that shows a lower soil organic matter is the scenarios where we applied less manure than the conventional tillage scenarios. So that kind of makes sense. We've essentially reduced the carbon inputs as well as limited crop growth and thereby carbon containing biomass. And this is consistent with what we found in literature too, where cover crops generally increase soil organic carbon, largely by taking in more carbon from the atmosphere into the system, as well as the additional residues from the crop. Similarly, the long-term and no-till systems increase soil organic matter through increased residue, as well as reduced soil disturbance and reduced erosion of topsoil. And here we're similarly showing the difference in this time average growing season respiration, soil respiration between each management scenario and the corresponding baseline. Respiration is really indicative of microbial activity in the soil. So again, these results generally made sense and were consistent with our expectations. The no and reduced tillage systems generally increase soil moisture, lower soil temperatures, and result in more plant residue, all which slow microbial decomposition and therefore soil respiration. With other management scenarios that increase respiration, such as cover cropping, mulch, and the high nutrient scenarios, we have additional biomass being added to the system. So we're seeing an increase in respiration due to that increased plant growth, nutrient cycling, and microbial decomposition. And you know, these kind of made sense with each other too. I'm not going to show all of these plots, but the trends that I'm showing here for respiration look really similar to those that we saw for carbon dioxide emissions, as respiration is sort of the primary biological process driving carbon dioxide emissions in these cropland systems. We also saw that carbon storage showed sort of reverse trends as this, which makes sense. And then I wanted to kind of bring it back to water quality in this last slide. So this is the percent change from baseline for sediment-bound phosphorus losses. And we see here that as we expect, most of the practices are reducing the amount of phosphorus moving off field due to erosion. No-till and no-till injection is really variable, but we see a slight positive number for the median. In some of these soils, Vermont's got a lot of sort of clay soils also. Those practices lead to sort of higher predicted phosphorus retention in near surface soils. So higher phosphorus concentrations in near surface soil and soil water, making more of that phosphorus available for transport during precipitation events. Note that aside from the high and low nutrient scenarios, all other scenarios received the same amount of additional nitrogen and manure as the baseline. So it could be for those fields that in no and reduced till, they might need less additional nutrients to meet crop needs and could in fact lower their losses and costs further by reducing those inputs. And that's when this is implemented in the tool and you're looking at site-specific results, the goal is that users will really be able to tease out some of those trade-offs. And then sort of lastly, in terms of these model results, we've done some initial work in model comparison. So this is still kind of preliminary, but again, this is mostly with respect to the greenhouse gas and carbon components. So we're looking here at how model results compare to Comet Farm and DNDC. And this is just, again, preliminary, but showing sort of what we're looking at. We're basically asking the questions, are predicted values from different models similar? And do different models respond similarly to simulated management? So you see on the top left that we're looking at the overall magnitude of carbon dioxide emissions for these different scenarios. And again, we're seeing that the models are generally comparable. And then the other plot shows the model responses to each of those practices. And again, we kind of see general agreement with how those practices impact soil organic matter. Okay, so getting back to the tool itself, these are the indicators that we sort of ultimately landed on. We thought it important to capture multiple indicators in each of these areas. I won't read them all, but you can see here that we have a suite of indicators, some representative of those 4 areas we started with, that we can now integrate into the farm prep tool. Reporting is mostly focused on annual average or average growing season values over a 30-year simulation. For a couple of these metrics, we do also report sort of the change, for example, in soil organic matter or change in bulk density from the start to the end of the simulations. And we have the ability to do some reporting on interannual variability also. So let's see here. This slide is showing how we've integrated these indicators into farm prep. And I'm going to just play this video that will show some of these reporting components while I describe sort of how we've structured this reporting. Yep. So when a user runs an assessment and it completes, a link becomes available that opens a new page, a new web page for your assessment results. Initially, you're shown your farm scale outcomes. So where it makes sense to do so, we've aggregated results up to the farm level based on the field scale simulations. For practice assessments, you can see the different practice-based scenarios that were created and run. Similarly, for optimization assessments, you can see you get essentially those 10 solutions that meet your criteria in terms of practice prioritization and meeting your phosphorus reduction targets. And in both cases, that current assessment is your specified, is your user specified management scenario. The farm scale management scenarios all open up so you can see results for each of your fields. And we have this comparison module such that users can select scenarios and bring them into a bit of a different view that allows for either comparison of each field across those scenarios or comparison of all fields within a scenario. And in this module, you can kind of see both inputs and outputs. So for example, if you notice improvements in soil organic matter based on a scenario, just replay this. I think it's going a little faster than I planned, but so for example, if you notice improvements in soil organic matter based on a scenario, you can easily scroll down and check other outputs, such as maybe what those yields look like in comparison to other fields, as well as most of the inputs that went into these scenarios. So what's different about the management or the physical characteristics that might be driving the differences in outcomes. And the compare by scenario option also allows you to map certain results. I'm sorry, I'm kind of struggling with my little, maybe I have to hover it. So the compare by scenario option also allows you to map certain results. So for example, you could easily look at what fields are likely resulting in more erosion and phosphorus under your current management, or what fields store more carbon due to cover crops or no-till implementation. I'll let this finish playing so that you guys can see the compare feature again. But here you're just seeing the select by field comparison. And again, you can kind of scroll through all these outputs and look at how they compare across these different scenarios and maybe what some of those driving factors are. And then the other option is this select by scenario, where you can compare the results of the different fields within that scenario, and you can map some of those components to look at the spatial distribution. Okay, and so I'm getting close to the end here, and I just wanted to bring it back to sort of what our ultimate goal was, or is. We want to increase adoption of agricultural management practices that enhance or maintain healthy soils, reduce greenhouse gas emissions and sequester carbon, reduce nutrient pesticide losses, and ultimately meet the agronomic needs of farmers through this customized scenario analysis. And of course, this tool is no silver bullet, but we hope that it can be used to support decision-making that leads us in the right direction. So where we've got to with this work includes establishing a robust global apex calibration for modeling multiple processes and output metrics on agricultural fields in Vermont. We see that trends in environmental responses to management practices, management practice changes align with our expected behavior across a broad range of metrics. We're seeing that tillage and nutrient inputs are primary drivers across most of those metrics, but other practices and factors definitely have an impact as well, and they're field specific. We also feel like our updated apex modeling approach and calibration that's implemented in farm prep is providing a more holistic quantification of the environmental benefits to changes in farm management. And lastly, I'll just mention a few of the ideas about where we're going with this. We're still working with the Agency of Agriculture in Vermont as they work to establish the second phase of the Pay for Performance program. So we're still doing a bit of work on this comparison module to further improve the communication of outcomes and decision support. The state is looking at additional outreach and training as it relates to the tool. And we're continuing to wrap up our evaluation of the greenhouse gas and working lands components. And there are other things that we could do with this tool. We could consider alternative baselines, for example, like relative field vulnerability in a region. We could build out climate change scenarios into the tool, so with projected climate instead of historical. And of course, there's endless customizations and additions that could be made to both the modeling and the tool to support other needs as well, including pesticides, scaling it up, modification of workflows, and integration with other tools. So with that, I just want to real quick formally acknowledge again some of the funding we've received through both the Lake Champlain Basin Program and NUEPIC, as well as from NRCS, executed with the Agency of Agriculture here in Vermont. And again, that's it. And I just want to thank everybody for joining. And I think I did okay on time, such that we have time for questions.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank Dr. Stryker for an interesting, informative webinar. If you do have questions, you should be able to unmute yourself at this particular point so that you can go ahead and ask them. Does anybody have any questions? Or if you can't do that, then you can also put a question in the chat and I'll relay them. It seems like people can't unmute themselves at this moment. Okay. Evelyn?
Hi, Jody.
There we go.
Great presentation. Really enjoyed it. Very, very informative. I am really interested in this tool, and I'm curious, a little bit of background. I don't think we've ever met, but I work a lot with Mike Winchell and several of the people on y'all's team. And so I'm the leader of the seat modeling team in Temple. So we do Apex all the time. But I'm curious, I know this is very specific to Vermont. What would the chances be of being able to take it to a broader scale, national if possible? Is that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we have similar tools that work sort of operationally at the national scale. So from a tool standpoint, it's really reasonable. I think that maybe the key is establishing those management practices that are applicable everywhere. So building out that management database, as well as then, the calibration and validation piece.
Yep, exactly. Okay. Yeah. Is there a way that we can anybody get to this tool and use it, or do you have to be part of a group basically? Or?
We just recently through one of these LCBP projects, developed a public facing, interface. So you can't just like go, you need an account, but okay. I'm happy to give you one. I will coordinate with the Vermont Agency of Agriculture because we're wrapping up some other stuff for them, and we'll probably be pushing that to like the production version of the tool in the spring. So it may make sense to wait a couple months and give you a login once we do that migration.
Yeah,
but otherwise, if you're interested really soon, I can definitely give you a login.
Yeah, I would. Well, and one of my other colleagues, I didn't really realize what this presentation was about. If I did, I would have sent her an invite, but I think she would be really interested in seeing some of this as well. And I guess that also leads to my other question is, will this presentation be made so that I can share it with her? I know it was recorded, but I don't know.
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure that's a Sebastian question, but my understanding is that yes, it is going to be made available.
Okay, very good. Because I'd love to let her look at this, and then we might get back with y'all on later date.
That is the intention, yeah. We have a couple other questions, Jody. So Carrie Ann asked, is pasture data just from Vermont? And where is the data set for pasture from? Private land or public land?
So the pasture, I mean, we had a couple of site specific sort of sites that we used that included pasture. Those were located in Vermont, and were, I think, monitored as part of UVM extension work. And then the larger data set that I was referring to that had the Cornell soil health measurements, that was collected as part of the Vermont through the Vermont Land Trust Healthy Soils Project, which I also think was NRCS funded, if I believe. So I think that data it is for Vermont, and it's for, again, farmers' land. So I mean, I think it's from private fields, but I'm pretty sure we were able to use the data, but without locations and stuff again. So we couldn't set up site specific models, but we could use those data distributions. Does that answer your question?
It was on the chat, so I'm assuming
you hear me, Jody?
Yes, I can. Hi, Carrie Ann.
Okay. Hi. Nice to talk with you again. Would it possibly have been NRI data? Would you know that? But because you said it might be NRCS.
I think that Healthy Soils program in Vermont that was run by the Land Trust was funded by an NRCS grant.
Okay.
So I do not think it's NRA data.
Okay. I just wanted, just as soon as you said that, that's what popped in my head. Thanks, Jody.
Okay. Rama actually said, very nice utilization of Apex. Jimmy would be proud. I'm not sure who Jimmy is, but I'm sure he would be proud.
I do. Thank you.
Jamie
Thank
Williams is the man. He's the Apex
He is.
developer. So
There you
and
go.
I
Yeah.
agree.
Totally. Thank you.
You had shown some results from soil respiration. Is that something that has been added? How does this work, and what are the parameters that govern this? Have you done any sensitivity analysis of these?
Yeah, so there is it's through some of the newer algorithms in Apex, but it exists there in the publicly available version of the model. It's representative of microbial decomposition in the soil. Things that we haven't done sort of a sensitivity analysis per se, like exactly on only soil respiration, but we've been looking at it in the context of all these other parameters, and we do have soil respiration from the state of soil health, the cache measurements that I mentioned. So we have done quite a bit of looking at that and digging into the code to sort of see what is driving those results. I mean, soil moisture is a big one. Yes, I mean, soil moisture is a big one, soil temperature, residues on the surface and in the topsoil layers. So those kinds of things. I'm happy to follow up on that a little bit more. It's 1501, Apex 1501. I saw that.
There you go. Yep. Okay. Does anyone else have any questions?
Disturbance of the soil also is one of the things that impacts that respiration output.
Okay. So we should be sending you an email right after the webinar or within a day or so, just asking you again to provide us with a little bit of input on future webinars, what topics you might be interested in seeing. I want to thank you very much for your interest in this webinar. I apologize again for the technical issues we had at the start. We'll iron those out for the next one for sure. So please stay tuned for more information on upcoming webinars in 2026. And with that, thank you very much, Dr. Stryker, and we'll call it a day. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye now.